Channeling or trance channeling, these are two different things. The art of channeling or the science of channeling, the way a medium does or a trance channel does, has been around forever. There was someone in the tribe who spoke to the ancestors where the words came through their mouth, their voice changed, their manner of being changed because the spirit was inhabiting their body. But let's talk about the word channel. What does the word channel mean? You have the English channel, you have canals. That means that there's a space, that a tube or an area, a tunnel, something, a passageway through a mass where water goes through, right? That's what the English channel is. Now, when it comes to a medium, the channel is that the water is information. It is the connection to a spirit guide coming through the channel. When you watch TV, you have different channels. What are those channels? They are specific points that are dial settings, you might call them, that are picking up specific frequencies. Back in the old days, before there was cable TV, you had an antenna and frequencies were flying through the air. Just think of your radio. You put a radio antenna up and the frequencies are flying through the air. Depending on how you set the dial, you are tuning into one particular frequency. Right now, wherever it is that you are, there's energy around you. There's radio frequencies all around you. Hundreds of radio stations are sending songs into the air wirelessly. If you have a radio and you put that little metal antenna up and you set the dial right to the right frequency, 98.7, 100.3, whatever it may be, it will pick up that frequency. It's a technology. Channeling is actually a technology that's very similar. It is a technology that is interdimensional. So interdimensional beings, which we call spirit guides or ancestors or angels or the watchers or the wisdom keepers, they are referred to in every culture. As far back as you can go, there are references to these beings that help guide us. These are what I call the spirit guides, and many people call the spirit guides. Channeling is the art, the science, the inner technology of being able to bring through their messages. Now, some people channel by writing messages. We call this automatic writing. That is where you clear your mind and you go into a peaceful state and allow your hand to move across the paper. You can fill hundreds of paper with movement, and I talk about this a lot. It's a very good exercise of learning how to increase your receptive capabilities like an antenna. You are upgrading your antenna. Remember that I said channeling is a technology. Right now, the way that people see it is that this is a mystical experience. Well, so were these cameras, would be considered a mystical experience. 1,000 years ago, the device that you're watching this on, that we're recording this interview on, this would be considered wizardry or something mystical or otherworldly. They wouldn't even understand the materials that were used to make this phone or laptop that you're watching this interview on. We'd have to go back in time and explain to them that this device is a technology. Imagine if we traveled back in time. Let's do a little history lesson so you get a very good understanding about technology versus wizardry or magic and science for a moment. If we were to travel back in time and take your iPhone, let's not go too far back. Let's go back to Abraham Lincoln, because we did have photography. We have pictures of Abraham Lincoln. Let us say that we time traveled and went back and we saw Mr. Lincoln in his office and we appeared. Poof, we're there. And we say, Mr. President, we've come from the future to share something with you. And he sees us. We still look like human beings, though we're wearing a little bit of different style of clothing. We're speaking English that he understands. And he says, what is it that you have to show me? And we pull out the iPhone. And he looks at it and he recognizes it made of metal and glass. And we say to him, would you like to see the Great Wall of China? And he might say yes. Or better yet, Mr. Lincoln, would you like to see the sperm fertilizing the egg in a human being? If he even knows what that means, other than the basic biology of it. The actual footage, which we have, don't we? Mr. Lincoln, would you like to see a baby panda being born or a kangaroo baby in the sack of its mother in a country called Australia? And then we show him YouTube. Imagine where his brain goes. He thinks that this is some sort of, black magic. That we're space aliens. He would say, well, I know that this person, this kangaroo, is not in this little piece of metal and iron. So how are you able to bring these messages here, these images here? Now, we would have to explain to him, well, Mr. Lincoln, this little metal box and glass that we're holding, which is called a phone, a cellular phone, is speaking to another box that is flying around the Earth. Flying around the planet. Remember, we're talking to President Lincoln. And this box is now speaking to another box, which is sending information through the air. We'd first of all have to explain to him what a movie camera is, right? Or a camera to pick up video. Then explain to him that we're able to take what we see and turn it into what we call bits of information and send it through the air. Through the air. We're taking pictures and sending them somehow into these invisible frequencies through the air. And it's transferred without losing any integrity of the quality of the picture or sound. And then through space, send this signal down through the invisibly through the air to my phone, and then I can show it to you. What do you think he would think? You think he would think this is technology? And this was a very intelligent man. He would never be able to believe this. He would simply say, you're from 10,000 years in the future, and maybe you figured out how to do some sort of strange magic. And we tell him, actually, we're not from 10,000 years in the future. We're only a couple hundred years ahead of you. Now imagine if he said, well, certainly, even if this is true, I know I do not recognize these materials, because he'd be touching the plastic. Where did you get these materials? They're certainly from another planet. And we could say, no, actually, Mr. Lincoln, they're from these hills right here. These materials were taken out of the ground and formed into this technology. How could he wrap his brain around that? Well, here we are. I'm telling you, channeling is a technology. So a channel sits in the chair, goes into a deep trance state, and allows the spirit guide to come through them. This is not something that is just happening in this day and age. It's happened centuries ago that we have record of, and certainly longer than centuries through oral tradition of tribes, that this ability existed in certain people. Of course, you'll have to understand that we as spirits go on, and spirit guides are these enlightened teachers that help us to learn how to navigate why we came to the planet, which was curiosity, discovery, learning about creation and love. Curiosity, discovery, and learning about creation and love, self-creation. So, what if in the future we get a camera, right? We're showing you the difference between the iPhone and back in Mr. Lincoln's day, so let's just jump 200 years in the future. Maybe there'll be a camera that will put on the channel, and the medium goes into that state of trance, and we see something like a light go into the medium's head, or we see an energy behind them, we see the outline of a person. Suddenly, people who are scientific will go, look, there's something there. There's something there. I don't know if it's a spirit guide, but there's something there. I mean, this guy says he's channeling, and look, there is something there. I don't know if it's a spirit guide, but there's something there. Okay, jump 200 years from there, and maybe a face will appear. Maybe then the camera will pick up the voice, and the channel doesn't even need to channel anymore. Now the camera will come in with this built-in feature called, oh, this camera can actually pick up spirit guides and turn it into video for you and save it, and we'll post it on Instagram for you. Imagine. Now, you're laughing. Just go back to Lincoln's example. Think about where his mind was. He might think that's hilarious that there'll be an iPhone one day, or that we'll send pictures and sound wirelessly through the air, and it will be received somewhere around the world. So, technology, magic, who knows? It's just about your awareness and how far we're getting with your understanding of these things. Now, let's just go back strictly to trance channeling and why it's important even. Because these are insights and perspectives. If you've read some good channels, some great channels who existed on the planet before me, it was Jane Roberts, who wrote the Seth material. Of course, we have Esther Hicks, and we have Bashar, and you can read some of my books where I've channeled many, many people whom you may have read about, figures in history. And at my Circle of Light, I channel my guides who give very specific messages to people. From mediumship readings, they'll say the person's name of their loved one who passed away, or they'll give some very specific information that no one could have possibly known. So these guides, not only do they give sometimes these very specific bits of information about your life, or details about, you know, things you were thinking about doing with your life, or a loved one who passed away, but they're also giving you perspective on seeing how you create your reality. And that's why so many books have been channeled. My books, I go into a trance state, and the spirit guide dictates the entire chapter in final edit. This is incredible. It's great because all I have to do to write a book is go to sleep, in a sense. Like, I wake up and hey, there's a chapter written. Now, channeling can also be something that's not trance channeling, but you receive information and you know it's coming from a higher source, from a spirit guide, and you're just relaying it. Full trance channel, and you can watch some of my videos here, or my trance channel on YouTube. You can watch me leave my body and the spirit guide fully take over. Now, how do you learn how to channel? Oh, how do you learn? You have to let yourself go. You have to be unafraid almost to jump off of a cliff. So imagine walking to the edge of a cliff and looking down and jumping. No parachute. That's kind of the guts it takes to trance channel. You have to be willing to leave your body. There'll be some kernel of you in the back seat. I call it, you know, just to make sure the body's okay, but you have no control over what you're saying or how your body is moving, but you're safe. The spirit guide, those are the guides that come through you. Now, how do you know who is the spirit guide and who's just an entity? You will learn. You will learn techniques about keeping those little ghosts aside. They're not really going to come through you and speak wisdom. So you'll immediately know that they're a low vibration entity. They're not very, you know, I'll just say they're not very bright in the way a teacher who's conveying spiritual wisdom is bright. So the spirit guides have a very distinct energy, very pure, very fine, very light, actually. What do I mean by light? Well, it's not heavy. It's strong, but not heavy. You'll know it when it happens to you. You have to practice slowing down your breathing. You have to practice letting go of your expectations and your thoughts and your old beliefs about how it should be. You have to be willing to dedicate an inordinate amount of time, and by that I mean not have any of these expectations that I'm going to have 5 meditations about my spirit guides and I'm going to get a message. You may not get a message if you try it 100 times, but 101st time you might get one word. Some people get entire paragraphs, but if you take this seriously, then you will not put a time limit on it. You will give yourself the opportunity to read books, watch some of the how-to videos that I have here. Channeling is the art of letting go. It's a conscious, unconscious experience, and it is an unconscious, conscious experience. So you're allowing yourself to go into that state of surrender, but there's a focus you're tuned to, just like the antenna, you are tuned to a high frequency. Therefore, only high frequency beings are going to come through you. So you don't need to be tense when you do it. You have to learn to be very loose. You have to flow. You have to learn to be very loose. Not like jelly though, just very relaxed, and this takes time. It's probably the bit of advice that is the hardest to actually implement in this life when someone says, relax. That's the hardest advice to do. If you do yoga, one of the hardest poses, in my opinion, the most challenging pose in yoga is called Shavasana. Shavasana is when you just lay down on the ground still. Why is that the most difficult pose in yoga? Because you're not operating on the X and Y plane. There's no plane for you to move or place your hand here or turn your hips this way. The Shavasana, the pose where you're lying down, is where you surrender. And that's the hardest thing for people to do. People can get into an athletic yoga pose and hold it there, and it can look beautiful, but very few people have the ability to stay still and to find stillness. Your spirit guides do not come through like a truck into your body. They are like a feather on your shoulder, and you have to be very sensitive. You have to be very vulnerable and open to allow even the tiniest message to come through. But I can promise you this, with dedicated practice, you will learn how to channel some messages. Some of you will become a trance channel, most of you won't. It doesn't matter. Everybody can learn to sing better. Doesn't mean you're going to be on stage, but you can learn to sing better than you do now. So follow your instincts, stay open. You know, you're actually channeling even now. Great chefs channel things. Anyone who surrenders to the experience, surrenders to something coming through them, that is a form of channeling. So find out where you do that in your life now. Use those same principles, apply it to when you want to channel your guides.